Hi, my name is Joseph Fioramonti, and I am one of the founding members at Constellations. And today I wanted to take you through kind of a fun exercise, how I set up constellations, how I source images, and how I think about the way that I arrange them for a project. Now, this was kind of born out of how my design business, Dark Square, uses this tool for rebranding. And in light of the holiday, I thought it would be a fun little test to run with our audience. What does American look like for the 4th of July? And so I'm going to kind of use my typical approach and strategy for finding good images to run a test like this and walk you through how to put them to collect those images and then put them into a test and then how to copy that link and share it with an audience. So let's get started. So I've opened up my Pinterest and I'm going to search um, one of three terms, or I should say a term with a few added words. So the way I usually start out is I will type in the word I'm kind of thinking about or something adjacent, American, patriotic, something of that nature. And then either the term graphic design or branding or typography. And usually one of those three searches pulls up a good starting point for collecting good design images if I was doing a design project, an ad campaign, or a branding campaign, something like that. That's kind of my day-to-day work. So I'm going to start with branding. I'm going to say American branding, and hit enter. And the next thing I'll do is hold the command key on my Mac and just open things that I find visually appealing. So I'm going to go ahead and click a couple of things that jump out at me here. And they should all kind of fit within the theme, but explore a range of ways of understanding it. So I'm looking at this and seeing kind of mid-century print-based media for these two, and that's really nice. I might grab that one or something really corporate and contemporary looking. And I'm just going to scroll through and command click a bunch of different swatches that look good to me that I would be interested in using if I were doing an American branding project. If that was some theme that I had a client who wanted to explore, what does American look like to their audience? And after that initial search, I might go back up to my search bar and try American typography and just look for stuff that hasn't come through my feed yet that might be good to include. And then lastly, I'll try that graphic design term at the end here, and I'm going to find slightly different stuff with that one. So you can see there's a lot of repeat images, but there's also a lot of new images with those three different kind of tack-ons to the end of this term American. I do a lot of work for different kinds of software and technology companies. And so I've learned over the years, like searching a term like tech or cybersecurity, you get a lot of the same stuff, and it's not always the best. So this one's giving me good results, but there are times where it's clearly, I need to find an adjacent term. So I might search digital or, sleek or whatever it might be. But this is giving me really good results here. So I have a fair bit of tabs open. You can see some of these are Amazon links, and I'll probably just ignore those. Pinterest puts those ads in there. Oh, that's cool. But that's step one. Step two is making a folder where I can collect those. And what I want to do is dig down to like the second and third level of my search. So I have some pretty good swatches I'm pretty happy about at the initial search level, but more often than not, the really good stuff are 2 and 3 clicks deep. So I'm going to close that window. I'm going to grab that swatch and put it in my folder. And I might just put this in here. I might also just save a new board and create. And that way I can get back to these if I need to. But I'm going to scroll down on each individual swatch, and that's where I'm going to find some really interesting stuff. So this isn't my typical patriotic red, white, and blue, but another thing that I'm really interested in doing for most tests are introducing some of the less expected design elements for a subject matter. And so in addition to giving me more good stuff that's kind of buried deep, it's giving me other design elements to pull in that aren't going to be the most expected things. And that's where the really interesting combinations can often take place. And so I'm just going to scroll through and really only click the best things that kind of jump out at me that I think are worth investigating, worth testing. It's nice. And then when I get, pretty far down, I will move on to the next one and I'm going to do the same thing. So this is the one that I just opened on that tag and I'm going to look and every time I go down another level, underneath a swatch like this, I'm going to find more and more things that are kind of removed from my initial term. And that's where the good stuff usually is hiding. And so I'll save all of this in a board or in a pin board. I'll save it in a folder and I can take this and feed that into a constellations test and build out those APMs, those audience perception maps to send to an audience. So that's pretty good. And my goal is to get at least 50, probably 100 swatches in here. And then I can narrow it down to the handful of things that I feel are really strong that I think would be a good answer, and then put it to the test. Do that design due diligence of asking my audience, what do they associate with this term? So I have 64 items. That's a pretty good number. I think plenty for running a test with 3 APMs in it, and a good mix of different visuals that range kind of Americana and red, white, and blue to, mid-century and more modern aesthetic. And so I'm going to take all of these and put them in a new test. So I'll bring down my constellations window here and click New Survey. And I'm going to call this American 2025. And I will add my first board. So for this test, I'd like to limit it to 3 dots. So that'll be 3 green and 3 red. And those will be what users indicate which swatches they associate with that term with. And in the keyword, I'm just going to put in the term American. So which do you associate with the term American? And I have my first grid right here. I'm going to call this American 1 of 3. So I think we have enough to do 3 boards here. And so I'm going to click the plus button and it's going to load up some past images I've used for other projects from my library. And I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop all of these in. And it will just take a few moments for it to upload everything because it is a pretty big drop with 64 images. But it does upload pretty quick, which is great. All right, so I have my library and now I can start choosing which images I'd like to put in each board. So for something like this, I don't know for certain, but I think it's fair to assume that if I have a page that has an even mix of images that are very clearly red, white, and blue, American flag imagery, those are going to outweigh other images that don't have that stuff in it, right? If I was to have a lot of beige imagery, some of the Americana stuff that isn't necessarily red, white, and blue, I think the flag imagery is probably going to get weighted pretty heavily in the test results. I don't know that for certain, but I think that's a safe assumption. So these are the kinds of considerations I take when putting my boards together and arranging them. If I'm doing a rebrand and I want to get to the core of what does this brand mean, and it's wide open, I will just put an even mix of things in that board. Or if I know it's for a specific industry, um, and I'm trying to find selections of things that go against the norm, I might not show industry imagery at all. So I could very easily run this test and ask, what does American look like, and not have any US flags, any red, white, and blue stuff in the test. But for this test, I'm really after, are people's perceptions, their preferences for this term American more aligned with very corporate, kind of clean, modern looking swatches? Does it favor mid-century stuff or something earlier? What other patterns are going to come out of this? But to avoid the obvious weighting of things that look red, white, and blue, I'm going to consider that when I parse out my boards. So I'm going to have at least one board that is primarily red, white, and blue things so that users are kind of forced to choose from those elements the more nuanced picks of is it really contemporary looking or a little more historic looking in some capacity. And then the other things that are not so heavily red, white, and blue or US flag based, those things I'm going to put in a separate board on their own so that those are parsed out. And I think that'll give me an interesting result, an interesting insight into how people think about this idea. So I'm going to start with the red, white, and blue one and choose some of the obvious imagery, stars and stripes. While I'm doing this, I'm also going to try to be aware of groupings and spread out more historic versus more modern aesthetics to make a more even read on it. I'm pretty happy with that arrangement. And in addition to that, I can add tags to these. If there were terms, if I wanted to kind of describe these with comma separated values, such as traditional or print-based, red, white, and blue. But I don't, for this particular test, have a tagging strategy in mind. So I'm going to leave those blank. I don't think we need to spend time doing that. So that's my first board. I'm going to go ahead and create the second board. And I'm going to do three dots again. I'll call this American 2 of 2 or 2 of 3. And then a keyword again. So I'm going to use the same keyword in this particular case. There are times when I will set it up so there's a different keyword in association with each APM, but for this one, going to test that same term for all three. And for this one, I'm going to try to lean away from the red, white, and blue stuff so much and see if there's any patterns we can discern from those non-red, white, and blue things. And for my last board, I think I'm going to have a mix, knowing that I'll probably get more positive responses to the red, white, and blue stuff for that term than the negative. And so it could kind of weight my results a little bit. But I'm gonna try to find kind of a middle ground here with this one. So with this last one, I still ended up leaning pretty heavy on the USA red, white, and blue flag imagery. And partly even some of the ones that aren't quite so red, white, and blue, I wanted to use imagery and text copy that use kind of those keywords like liberty, made in the USA, land of the free, just to avoid a situation where there were really kind of heavily American looking things and things that weren't quite so much. I want to force users to choose, make tough decisions between things that could all be appropriate, right? I'm trying to get to what's the most appropriate, what's most associated with this concept. And so my board is set up and ready to go. And now I'm going to go ahead and hit publish on my board. And that just takes a few minutes to generate. So it will generate this link. I can copy that link and share it with our social media audience and get their very nuanced opinion about what do they associate with this term American here as we go into the 4th of July. So I'm going to go ahead and just open a new private window and confirm that my test rendered properly. So we'd like your input. You've been selected. You've been invited to the American 2025 survey. Please click the next button to proceed to the survey. So go ahead and click. That looks great. We have CVD mode for anybody who has any kind of color blindness or color confusion. That way they can see the dots a little more clearly. So this board looks good. This APM looks great as well. And then my final one looks really solid. So I think this will be an excellent test and really fun to see the results here as we celebrate America's birthday. So thanks for watching. And if you have an idea for a Constellation test to run, or you're interested in getting a demo, please reach out to us on our website, constellations.app, constellations.app. Thank you.